the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. My name is Philip Boone, and I use he, him, his pronouns.
And I'm Caitlin Drake. I use female pronouns, she, her, hers.
Before we begin, I'd like to state that the views represented in this podcast are those of the individuals in this conversation and not the official position of Boston Avenue United Methodist Church. We're recording this podcast remotely from our individual homes during the COVID-19 pandemic as we practice physical distancing as a church community. This podcast is part of a series that will visit the topic of race and religion. We start this conversation grounded in the United Methodist Book of Discipline, Division 1, General Article 5. Racial justice. The United Methodist Church proclaims the value of each person as a unique child of God and commits itself to the healing and wholeness of all persons. The United Methodist Church recognizes that the sin of racism has been destructive to its unity throughout its history. Racism continues to cause painful division and marginalization. The United Methodist Church shall confront and seek to eliminate racism, whether in organizations or in individuals, in every facet of its life and in society at large. The United Methodist Church shall work collaboratively with others to address concerns that threaten the cause of racial justice at all times and in all places.
Today our guest is Dr. Tiffany Crutcher. Dr. Tiffany T. Crutcher is a native of Tulsa, Oklahoma, who was recently thrust into the national spotlight following the death of her twin brother, Terence Crutcher, who was shot by a police officer in Tulsa, Oklahoma, while holding his hands in the air. The murder of her brother compelled Tiffany to speak out against police brutality, particularly the killing of unarmed Black men. She has chosen to turn her personal tragedy into an opportunity to bridge fear, mistrust, and help transform a justice system that has long perpetuated injustice. She has remained committed to organizing coalitions and task forces throughout the country that promote the interests of minority communities. Dr. Crutcher is the founder of the Terence Crutcher Foundation. The foundation's primary focus is criminal justice and policing reform, providing scholarships to African Americans bettering their life through education, and promoting nonviolence initiatives throughout communities of color. Welcome, Dr. Crutcher.
Thank you so much for having me, Caitlin and Philip. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
You were really thrust into this justice movement in September of 2016. Can you tell us about this experience for you and for your family?
Well, absolutely. And before I get started, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Pastor David Wiggs and the entire Boston Avenue Church, who's been so supportive of our movement over the last few years, especially your pastor. And so to answer your question, 4 years ago, my twin brother was killed by law enforcement. I was living in Montgomery, Alabama at the time when I received the phone call and couldn't believe what I was hearing. But it wasn't a call from my mom or my dad. It was from a cousin who lived in Dallas. After about an hour or so, I still hadn't received that call, so didn't believe it was true. I went straight to a friend's house and asked him to start praying with me. And I paced back and forth. An hour and a half went by, and I started getting phone calls from 918 area codes. I would not answer that call. And finally, the name Dad popped up on my phone screen. And my friend told me to answer it. I was afraid, but I did. On the other end of that line when I picked up was my dad, my hero, my father screaming hysterically, saying that they killed his son. And I asked who, and he said, the police. We're at the hospital right now. They won't allow us to go in. They won't allow me to see my son. They won't allow me to go and pray and lay eyes on his body. And I was just devastated. I lost it. I don't even know what happened after that. But then I snapped back to and said, I have to get in my car and drive to Alabama. And my friends wouldn't allow me to do that. Got a plane ticket and I was home the very next morning. After that, that's when my life changed drastically. And I've been on this journey for 4 years now, and it's just been really unbelievable. I still pinch myself every day and ask myself, is this a dream? Is Terence really gone? Is his son, Terence Jr., gonna grow up without his father or his daughters? We've truly been just trying to get through it. We haven't had a chance to mourn or grieve because it's been one thing after the other fighting for justice for Terence.
I think in the wake of some hurtful comments that have been made nationally about your brother's death, It would be powerful to know more about who he was as a man. Would you tell us about your twin brother, Terence Crutcher?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that question, Philip, because, we have endured a lot of hurtful comments. I make it a point, and I'm intentional to not read the comments after articles or to even read comments on Facebook or when people direct message me. I've had a lot of people saying ugly things, nasty things about my brother, about my family, about me. And it's difficult, but I've learned to outlast my critics and truly override that hate with something positive. And so I made it a point, and I decided that I would not allow hate, racism, bigotry to control or tell my brother's story. Because a lot of times when situations like this happen, there's a tactic or even a playbook where the victim is demonized or the victim is blamed for his own demise. And no one ever really thinks about, was this actually necessary? Terence, my mom says that's her compassionate son. And a lot of times I get a little envious because I'm like, Mom, am I not compassionate? Me and Terence, we came out 3 minutes apart. He came out first, and they never separated twins. We did everything together. We were a part of a junior orchestra. I played the viola, he played the cello. We were a part of a jump rope team together, believe it or not, a professional jump rope team. And we traveled and went on field trips, and they made us stay in the same room. We couldn't be with our friends because they just didn't believe in separating twins. And then we decided that we would go off to different high schools. I went to Booker T. He went to Tulsa Central with his friends and played football. I played basketball. But every birthday that I can remember up until our last birthday, there was something special about twins where my mom and dad got us a cake. Even when I was in Alabama, that cake would say, "Happy birthday, Terence and Tiffany," and they would FaceTime me or take pictures, and we would have our talk. But Terence loved gospel music, beautiful voice. He loved to sing. And that's where you would find him every Sunday in someone's choir stand, and my dad and mom's choir stand, because my parents are gospel musicians and ministers. That was Terence's safe place. That was his place of solace. And he loved to cook. His children right now, they make this special dish that their dad made, chicken spaghetti. And if you tasted this recipe, you all, you couldn't get enough of it. He called himself the Rib King. He thought he was a grill master, and he would give you the shirt off of his back. I remember on several occasions, just as a teenager, we would wake up and Terence would have someone on the sofa with a blanket, someone whose mom may have kicked him out or someone who didn't have parents. Terence always found that someone who was struggling or overcoming adversity, and he would say, "Dad, Mom, can they stay with us?" So he was a very compassionate person, a big teddy bear, and finally got to the point where he said, "You know what? I'm going to school." And the day he was killed, he was actually leaving Tulsa Community College, his first day of music appreciation class, didn't get the notice or the email that the class was canceled due to low enrollment. And if that class had not been canceled, I believe that he would be here today.
You and your parents, Reverend Joey and Leanna Crutcher, created the Terence Crutcher Foundation to honor Terence. Can you tell us about the work of this foundation?
Absolutely. The Terence Crutcher Foundation, I must say, was birthed out of pain, sheer pain. We had so much expectancy that we would receive justice for Terence's killing. And of course, that verdict was rendered not guilty. Not only was that not guilty verdict rendered, but the jury penned a letter stating that we don't believe that Betty Shelby is blameless. It said that, and I'm paraphrasing, that she should never be a patrol officer again. But because of the way the laws are written, it was just difficult to render that guilty verdict. That was a sign to us that we needed to change those laws. And that was a tough pill to swallow for us. And then we heard a little bit later that some of the jurors got really hungry and tired and irritated. And so they just started flipping their answers because they hadn't ate after 9 hours of deliberation. And I always say that I would have fed the jury, but we found out that there was no money in the DA's budget to feed the jurors, after deliberating for so long. And so we were devastated. My mom has this quiet strength. And throughout the trial, throughout this journey, you never saw her break. You really never saw her cry, with the exception of the funeral. But after that verdict was rendered, we left that courtroom, cameras everywhere, and we went into the elevator. And when the doors closed, my mother collapsed into the wall and started screaming, "My son is gone." And she finally let it out and didn't know where to go from there. I didn't know what to do. The community was devastated. And so the next day, after a lot of love and community support, we got up and we decided that we were going to continue to fight. I made a promise when I spoke to the world, when I reacted to the verdict, that I wouldn't rest until I became a part of the change that I wanted to see, until we transformed these systems of injustice. And that's when we decided to start the Terence Crutcher Foundation. We realized that we had to figure out a way to turn our pain into purpose, our anger into advocacy, and our fear into faith. And we did that. And this foundation, wow, it's become a household name, not just in Tulsa, but in the state of Oklahoma. And now it's getting its credit nationally for the work that we are doing on the ground, for the work that we are doing to help students who are overcoming adversity continue their education when they graduate, giving them that boost that they need through a scholarship fund that we created in partnership with Tulsa Community College in honor of Terence. We're helping formerly incarcerated individuals with second chances, or have a second chance, because we believe that's what Jesus would do. The God we serve is a God of second chances. And so what experiences or spaces or education can we provide to help individuals with a second chance? Because I believe, in the words of my dear friend Brian Stevenson with the Equal Justice Initiative, that we're so much more than the worst thing we've ever done. That's another element. And then I believe that whenever there's a community issue, it requires a community response. So we created this space to really go and work on our community through nonviolence initiatives, partnering with churches and other organizations to be proactive and figure out what children need in our community. Whether it's after school programs, whether it's doing things in the school to break this school to prison pipeline where our children are, 1 in 3 Black children will go to prison. How do we do that? How are we proactive? And so we're working on programs and building out things to help our children thrive and become better citizens. And so the goal is really to change that narrative that perceives Black people as bad. That's what that helicopter, the police officers in the helicopter, that's exactly what they called Terence. They said he looked like a bad dude. The only thing they could see from that far up in the air was the color of his skin. They prejudged him. That implicit bias kicked in. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. My mother, Leanna Crutcher, started the Mother's Love Initiative to help mothers who's been affected by gun violence and who's lost their children to police brutality, to find ways to heal. And I wouldn't wish that sorority on anyone. And so, man, we're doing a lot, Caitlin. And then one of my biggest initiatives, where everyone, when you all see me on TV or when you see me at City Hall, it's our Justice and our Reform Initiative, where we're on the front line every day, picking up that axe, chopping down systemic racism and systemic oppression, trying to change policies. I asked for peaceful protests when Terence was killed because that's the culture of my family. Everything I do is rooted in love. And so I believe that the only way things will change is to change policies. And that's been challenging. We've had so much opposition. But again, I made a promise that I would not rest. And as exhausting as it is, man, God's supernatural strength has truly sustained me and my family.
If somebody would like to look up the Terence Crutcher Foundation and see all the good work that is being done through this foundation, how might they go about doing that?
Thank you for that question, Philip. Of course, we're on Facebook. You can go to the Terence Crutcher Foundation. And what I found out, and I didn't know this, Terence's name is spelled so many different ways. And so they told me that the way my mom spells it is unique, but it's TERENCE Foundation, Terence Crutcher Foundation, or you can go to our website at the terencecrutcherfoundation.org, the terencecrutcherfoundation.org, and you can see what we're doing and what we're up to these days.
What are some changes that you would like to see in the Tulsa community?
Man, do you have another hour or two? So many. And, I can't really talk about what happened to Terrence Phillip without talking about our history and our historic past with the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921, where my great-grandmother, Rebecca Brown Crutcher, had to flee in fear of her life. And so when we talk about generational trauma, my family, we've dealt with it, from generation to generation. And I often wonder what my grandmother was thinking when she had to flee from racial terror violence, trying to survive. And I'm so thankful that she did. And I often wonder what Terrence was thinking the last minute or seconds of his life when he really didn't know what was going on, when he was in crisis. Terrence was in a crisis at the time. He needed help. He didn't need a bullet. And so what needs to change? Those railroad tracks at Greenwood and Archer that divided the south side of Tulsa, which is the white community, from the north side of Tulsa, the Black community. I feel, just to give you a broad answer, that those railroad tracks need to be erased symbolically. And that happens in the heart and it happens in the mind. Because right now, those railroad tracks still symbolize the same thing. When you think about a child in North Tulsa, their life expectancy is 10 years less than a child's life expectancy on the south side of town. When you look at the educational resources on the north side of town, they're sparse compared to the resources on the south side of town. And then on the north side of town, Philip, we live in a food desert. We don't have a quality grocery store. But if you cross those tracks, you have Sprouts, you have Whole Foods, you have Reese's, everything that's needed. And so there's a lot that needs to change. But first, we have to change our hearts and we have to change our minds in order for that real change to take place. Because all you have to do is come to Tulsa and open your eyes and see that we live in a tale of two cities, even in 2020.
Many of our listeners either have a connection specifically to our church or more broadly to the Christian faith. And it's an important aspect of how they operate within the world. How has your faith shaped how you view this work and really this calling?
Well, it's the only thing, my faith, that sustained me and my family. I don't believe that I would be standing or even possessing the strength that I have without a higher power. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in a higher being. But I believe that it's been God's supernatural strength that sustained us. And so every morning I'll just say this before I get up and pound the pavement to go and fight for justice. I get up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock and I work on feeding my mind and starving my doubts and detoxifying all that's not good, all of the negativity, all of the negative thoughts. And I intentionally commit my thoughts to God because I realize that my thoughts are too toxic to navigate what we're dealing with in this world, to navigate this system, the systemic racism or the hate and the bigotry. And so I tend to flow in a spiritual realm where something is happening. I have to quickly commit my thoughts to something good or ask God. I have these conversations with God and people think I'm crazy, but we truly have a relationship and I talk to him and I do ask God why. I've asked God why so many times, why my family, because what people don't understand about my family is that we've been through so much pain and trauma, starting with my great-grandmother. Then we lost my nephews to gun violence back in 2008, 16 years old. Leaving church, broad daylight, all of them headed to college. They lived in Broken Arrow, and a car drove up next to their car and shot it up with an AR-15. Strict case of mistaken identity. My nephew Donovan was getting ready to turn 17, hit 36 times. He'll never be that broadcast journalist. His brother Adrian was 16 and being recruited by colleges all over the country to play basketball. The bullet went through his spinal cord and now he's paralyzed from the waist down. He survived, but he's wheelchair bound. But we turned that negative into a positive, and now he's playing wheelchair basketball. He's driving with hand controls. My first cousin was in that car. His right eye was blew out, right arm paralyzed. He was headed to college on a band scholarship. And so that was traumatic for us. And then fast forward, my older brother, Joey Jr., my dad's firstborn, my oldest brother, we lost him to colon cancer at the age of 44. He left 5 children. And I made it my mission to find the cure for cancer, 2 years. But I ended up in his hospital room at St. John or Hillcrest, I can't remember. And we watched him take his last breath. And he was counting on me as the healthcare provider. He told everybody, my little big sisters, we're going to find this cure. And I felt like I failed. Felt like I failed my nephew because he told everybody, my aunt is going to help me walk again. She's in healthcare. Felt like I failed. And then here I am, Terence, my twin. I lose him to police brutality, unarmed with his hands in the air. And I said, you know what? I can't fail this time. God, I need you. Why? And I believe it's okay to ask God why, because he asked Jesus when he hung on that cross, he asked God, he asked his Father, why hast thou forsaken me? And I believe that when you talk to God and you ask God why, it means you have a relationship. It means that you believe, you're a believer. But at the end of the day, I know that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. And we truly love God. And love has been the foundation of this fight. People may think we're angry, but it's righteous anger. I believe that we serve a God of righteousness and a God of justice. And, you know, I pull from that every day. And so I don't get out of this house without leaning on him and making sure that I spend time with him, because his supernatural strength sustains me every single day.
What are some actions that members of our church, of Boston Avenue, that we can take?
I would say just get involved, and that's a layered question and a complex question for me. I appreciate the question, but I have to be honest and candid. I don't know if I can answer that as an African-American woman. I believe that white folks should be talking to other white folks, trying to figure out how to break these systems that was created by other white folks. You get what I'm saying? Our burdens are too heavy. We've endured every era of oppression and we survived, but our white allies and our white friends, I can't say enough. They've been so supportive of this movement, but I believe that just making sure that you speak truth to power, that you don't turn a blind eye to what you see because you're afraid of maybe what a boss may say or what maybe grandma or grandpa may say. I believe that we're going to have to work hard and have these kitchen table conversations to really, really fix this. And we're going to have to come together, Black folks, white folks, Latinx folks, everybody. There's an African proverb that says when spider webs come together, they can tie up a lion. And so we're going to have to get interconnected, come together. But I need white folks talking to other white folks. And I do believe that attitudes are shifting with the series of killings publicly, where before, you know, we may have thought that, oh, Terence was just an isolated incident, or Trayvon Martin was isolated, or Mike Brown. But to see this back to back to back, I believe that people now see that this is a broader issue that needs to be addressed. So that's what I would say, you know, get involved, keep asking questions, and no role is too small. You know, I don't care if you just post something on your Facebook page that gets people talking about it. You know, it may be that small, or it may be, hey, Dr. Crutcher, I see you're going to do an event. Can I come and volunteer? Can I just sign people up or check people in? Can I make some calls for you? No role is too small. I don't expect people to be on the front lines and at City Hall with me every single week, but even just making a donation, because this fight for freedom, this fight for justice, it isn't free. It costs, not just financially, but physically, emotionally, spiritually, but we cannot rest. And once we all become free, then I can truly sit back and say, this is good. And the goal is to make sure that Terence's children don't have the same fate as their father. The goal is to make sure that those words hold true of Martin Luther King, you know, that one day little white kids and little Black kids will be able to play together and not even be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Those principles still hold true today. Our work is not done. We have so much more work to do, but it's going to take all of us.
So I'm of the belief that we can't have thoughts and prayers, but that when something tragic happens or when something really pushes us, that requires both spirit searching and tangible change and action. But prayer is also very powerful. So I don't want this to be construed as just thoughts and prayers, that this is prayer as part of something bigger and larger. But how can our church pray for you and your family, Tiffany?
Wow, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has ever asked me that, and I really appreciate that question. And I know that people, they intercede and they pray for us all the time. But to be asked that specific question, I just ask for strength. Ask for God to sustain us. Ask for God to keep my mom and dad's spirits high, because I hear them some nights just laying in the bed crying and holding each other. I see the grief in my dad's eyes when he watches the TV and hears the mayor or anybody saying that Terence was responsible for his death. And so I just ask for you all to pray that God keeps them strong, spiritually, emotionally, because they're getting up in age and they're taking care of kids right now. Just pray for our strength.
We will do that. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just would like to say that I'm so grateful for the outpouring of support that we've received all over the city over the last several weeks. It's been triggering, been painful, but so many people, they've supported the Terence Crutcher Foundation. They've supported this movement for change. And my ask and my prayer, my request is that we not just make this a trend or a 2-week or a 3-week or a 1-month trend. We need to be consistent. We need to keep up this fight for change, for truth. And I believe that if we keep it up and we sustain this, and if we're consistent, then and only then will we be able to lock arms and get to that place of reconciliation that we all long for. Just keep speaking out for what's righteous and what's just.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Crutcher.
The pleasure is mine, and I'm so grateful. Thank you for having me.
This has been the Ascends at Boston Avenue podcast. Our producer is Alicia Urban. Our theme music was composed and performed by Wyatt Smith. Boston Avenue United Methodist Church is a progressive historic church located in downtown Tulsa, Oklahoma. Please check out our social media for more information on what's going on at Boston Avenue UMC. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We'll talk to you next time. Thank you.